It's great to see that some of you could make it to this very last slot here at the Money 2020 conference. We were actually just joking if anybody would turn up, but it's great to see that so many of you are still working through these last panels with us here at Money 2020 conference. And I can assure you we have spared some of the most exciting discussions actually to the very end. And I'm honored to introduce our two panels here to you today. On our first panel, it's all about a user's data, about data privacy, and how we have lost control of our users' data and how we might be able to regain it. When we were working through the streets of Copenhagen yesterday night using your Google Maps, using your Money 2020 app, most of us don't really realize what data we are sharing or who we are sharing this data with. So the first panel will then also discuss, amongst others, is there a way to take back control of our own users' data? How could this work? And is there a way to also decide who we want to share our personal data with? And this is, I think, a very interesting discussion because it touches the core of our current data economy. And while we're discussing these questions, regulators are already setting the stage and providing new regulation that is regulating actually how corporations can collect our data, how they need to inform us about that, and what they can do with it. And the two most important regulations which we'll have here, or which are coming up at the moment, are GDPR, which is all about protecting a user's data, and also regulating how corporations need to notify us what they do with our data. And on the other side, PSD2, which is about putting the user back in control and allowing the user then to select what data the user would like to share with which corporation. I think they're very exciting questions, and I'm very honored that Tim will later on discuss these questions with the panel. On our second panel today, this is all about behavioral analytics and how our panelists, our panel corporations, are using behavioral analytics to create new products that really create value for the end user. And these companies are then discussing their real-life use cases with us. Especially, it's all about how they use behavioral analytics to get to know the customers, to really understand what customers like exactly at the right point in time, and then also to nudge customers. So to recommend a desired behavior to the customer at exactly the right point in time. And this is then more about being a personal trainer of the user by the use of behavioral analytics. In the second panel, we are also discussing many use cases to make it really relevant for us, and also trying to demystify a little bit some of the buzzwords that are surrounding behavioral analytics. Great, I'm now honored to introduce Tim. Tim, please come up on stage. Tim is a journalist. We've met for the first time, I think, 3 years ago, when we were both in different capacities still. Tim has written about the mobile industry for 15 years. He is a journalist, and he was also an analyst for Screen Digest. He's at the moment working for the Mobile Ecosystem Forum and has published his white paper on the personal data economy. So Tim is really an expert in the subject, and he told me before the panel that he has spent the last weeks practicing the vocals for Bohemian Rhapsody. So maybe, if we are lucky, we get to listen to the Galileo part. Tim, stage is yours.
Thanks for mentioning that, Matthias. Actually, I'm going to ask the panelists to take their seats while I set the scene. Yeah, I am a bass player in a dad rock band, and we have been working on Bohemian Rhapsody, and I do sing the Galileo bit. And also, while I'm embarrassing myself, we do Teenage Dirtbag as well, and I sing the girls' part in that. So my kids always find that quite funny. Just to sort of set the scene for this session, to echo what Matthias said, so I'm Tim, I'm a freelance journalist, but I'm also working closely with the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, which is a trade body based in the UK, but with a global membership. And it represents all sorts of companies across all sorts of verticals that are all united in pursuing getting the most value out of the mobile channel. So, as well as members who are on the panel here today, we also have Gemalto and Wirecard and Docomo Digital and plenty of companies out there, in addition to telcos and other companies like that. And the MEF is very, very focused on trust, security and privacy issues. Done a lot of surveys, and in fact tomorrow we'll be launching the results of our latest consumer trust survey. So Google that and check it out. Interesting results on people's individuals' opinions, changing opinions around notions of privacy when it comes to data. And today, I mean, the reason this is such an interesting subject is because in the digital world, and the way I like to frame it is there are multiple versions of me. So there's the shopper me that goes to different merchants. There's the patient me that has my details registered with doctors and hospitals. There's the bank customer me, obviously. There's the adulterer me, all my details on Ashley Madison. I'll be checking that later. And in fact, the average UK customer has around 118 accounts, according to one survey I've read. So the problem with this is that we don't really know who's got our data. We don't know what data they've got on us, and we don't know what they're doing with it. Now, that's kind of leading to certain problems around trust, which obviously we're addressing in this survey we're releasing tomorrow. And one solution to that is that we all stop sharing our data, but obviously that's no real solution because, as we all know, when we share data with third parties we trust, we get quicker, more efficient, and more personalised services, and that works for everybody. So that's not really a solution. So we need to find a way of sharing our data in a more secure and trusted way. Now, the problem at the moment is that even when we do trust third parties with our data, that data is often limited. So, my bank knows my bank details, it doesn't know my medical details. My insurance company doesn't know my employment details, and so on. And there may be occasions when we want these third parties to actually have access to those under our control. So the data is kind of limited. The data can also be wrong. I can change my address, and what a faff that is to inform all of the companies that I have a relationship with that I've changed my address. And the data is also siloed, as I indicated earlier. Even this data, which is questionable, it just sits in different silos and can't be easily shared between different companies. So we need a system where the information is accurate and up to date and shareable. And who's the best third party to control that? Well, maybe it's not a third party, maybe it's a first party, maybe it's the individual. So if we can somehow find a way of getting the individual back in control of their own data, then that data will, by implication, be complete, and it will be up to date, and it will be accurate. And in a way, it will be safe, because if we all have control of our own data, then it's not in one central location where hackers can get at it. So this is a very fascinating and compelling idea. I've only learned about it in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, and whenever I talk in the pub to anyone about it, people are always interested because it's kind of like a new idea, but a very obvious one. So the question is how you make it happen. And this idea is kind of known as the me-to-be, because obviously you can explain it better than it helps. So it's been known as the Internet of Me, me-to-be, the API of me. It's got various names. And actually I wrote a paper about it, a little bit of a plug, for the MEF and for Juniper, which is free to download. On the personal data economy. So again, Google that and download that. So it's a kind of a utopian idea, the idea that we can all control our own data and share it on our terms with trusted third parties. And it's not easy to get there, it requires a lot of work. But momentum is growing around that idea, and there are lots of startups. We have Miko that's very involved on the panel in this idea. But also, it's obviously, that's the kind of carrot, the idea of giving people more control over their data. The stick is, as Matthias said, the regulation. So, GDPR, which you can be fined up to 4% of your turnover if you breach the rules of GDPR around giving people right to access their data. And obviously PSD2, which is, both a carrot and a stick, of an opportunity to develop new services which do give people more autonomy. So, with that, that's kind of the introduction over. I'd like to introduce my panel. We have Katrina from Miko. Wave, Katrina. Esme from Barclays. Barclays is the bank, in case you didn't know. Cecile from AXA, an insurance company, and Glyn from Telefonica, a big telephone company. Telephones, remember those. I'm going to ask you first, Katrina, because obviously you're a startup that's very involved in everything that I've just talked about. So maybe you could, first of all, explain where you think the problem is that made you start your business, and what are the opportunities around giving people back more control of their data?
Okay, so where it all started for me was on a corner, I think on a Friday night, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I just stumbled out of seeing a sci-fi movie, and Minority Report was the film, and I was standing on the corner and I was thinking, wow, is that the future? Because there's some really cool things there, but there's also some really creepy things. And are we on this track towards a society where actually we're kind of cogs in the wheel, or could all of this really cool technology create really meaningful value for us as society moves forward? So that's that was the thing that was bugging me, and it was a problem that kind of didn't go away over the course of a decade. And then a few years ago, I started to look at the value of personal data on the balance sheet for organizations, and started to look at the power of it in terms of helping to plan a city, or the way communities can form, what was happening in education and health and finance and insurance and telecommunications. And it just seemed the obvious evolution of that was what we call the API of me. The fact that in the not too distant future, anything I wear, wearable, my clothes, anything that I touch or do will have some sort of data and information, and that could be really valuable to share with the people and organizations I trust in context, together with my identity, to get everyday things done. And that was the birth of Miko.
And so Miko is actually a product as well as a kind of an idea around working with third parties. So maybe explain the app and how it works.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, I'm trying to avoid as many buzzwords as possible. So I'm going to focus on the suite of APIs rather than saying, it's a platform and there are a number of applications or apps, and that's true. But what we focus on is helping the individual through a couple of things: a consent engine that enables you to decide what you want to share and under what terms with who you trust, and that could be peer-to-peer, or that could be with your bank, or that could actually be together with your telco. Getting access to information, which I'm sure we'll talk about some of the regulatory drivers. And the importance of getting access rather than owning it or having it in one central place. There's obviously security issues with that. But it's the idea that you actually help remove the friction of getting things done together with your bank and your telco or your insurance company. So a perfect example, some of the work we've been doing is it would be great to onboard much faster to a new bank account. And there's a lot of information that's required, but you may already have a really trusted relationship with your telco where they have collected that data and information, and it's regulated and it's secured. But the ability for you to access and give permission to either your insurance company or to your bank, and then actually be part of the value that's created and shared back to you, everybody wins in that scenario. So what we've focused on is, first of all, our core, if you like, product, which is the API of me. And then what we focus on is building out these journeys that are either industry specific or allow you to move across an enterprise or hop between different enterprises, and you're the simple thing that joins that. And the reason we've taken that approach is, you guys know what it takes for two very large organizations to agree on a joint venture and work through the contracts and bring something to market. By allowing the customer to actually be part of that, we can do that in a very lightweight way. And the changing regulatory environment, GDPR, PSD2, e-privacy, actually prescribe for this need. And so we see there's a huge value of bringing the citizen, the customer, the patient, the student directly into that value chain in a trusted, transparent way, and then creating something where there's value on both sides.
So, Cecile, Katrina's alluded to the culture of big companies and the need to do things quickly and how that's not always possible. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about AXA's attempts to give some autonomy back to users and the internal conflicts and what resulted from that.
Yeah. First of all, I must say that insurance company, we are only living on data because we need to know data to know how to price the risk of a person. So we decided that we need to work on that because we want trust of our customers and we want also them to get their data back and get value from their data. So we created something, for instance, in AXA UK actually, about a trust initiative where we share with our customers for home, car or travel insurance why we pay the claims or why we don't pay. And we give statistics, it's all open, so that people can see why they can trust us to pay the claim they have. We also decided that we will not sell the personal data of our customer. So we said that people entrust us with their data. It's not for us to make money out of it like this. And believe me, there are among banks and insurance people that make a lot of money out of this business. So we decided we will not be such a data broker. And also we decided that we really need a place to have this conversation inside our company. We decided we need to be challenged by external people that have a view on what we should do or maybe avoid when it comes to personal data. So we have created a panel, which is a place where we have a hot debate and hot discussion about what we do or what we don't do with the data. And in this panel, we have philosophers, ethicists, legal experts, technical experts, people that can talk about anonymization for hours or data deletion or data portability. And we really sit with them and show them what we do. And maybe I can give a concrete example. So at AXA, we have something called AXA Drive. So it's an app. When you start driving, there is an auto start, and the app will see how you brake, are you respecting all the speed limit or not. And then is the question, how much can you trust us when we do that? And first of all, we work with the panel in the fact that we do not need actually to have the personal data, but we can just have average of people using the same road or the same street. And so there are ways that we could protect the personal data of our people and not be a big brother in this society. Second of all, we thought we could give some data back to the customer, so explain to the customer, maybe this road is more dangerous than this one, and that could be of value to him to know that. And also, we even think that talking about giving back data is not only for the individual, but it's for the society. So we are considering maybe calling a region or a city and telling them, actually, if there is only one road you can fix this year, maybe do this one in priority. Because we know from the patterns of use and from the patterns of accidentology that this is really a risky way, a risky place for people. So what I think is very interesting is it's challenging. There are lots of debate because people say, oh, whoa, we cannot share those data. We will lose people, they will quit our company. Actually, no. All the research we have that people feel trust, feel they know what we do, and they encourage us to continue to do that. And so it's a long and chaotic way, but we are on it, and I think we're learning every day from this way.
I think an insurance company having a philosopher on its data advisory panel is the most French thing I've ever heard.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and good for you.
Vive la France.
Yeah. So Glyn, talking about giving customers back their data, Telefonica is very, very committed to this. You have a product called Aura. We're not going to discuss Aura because I'm not quite sure what it is. But Aura is a sort of a project to give some like a digital assistant which will give people access to more data. But Glyn, your own responsibility is a division called Smart Digits. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what Smart Digits is and how it helps companies in the financial services sector in particular.
Yeah, sure. So actually similar themes to Cécile. We talk about actually security, transparency and empowerment. But really the first two are just enablers along with good regulation, for example, GDPR, e-privacy, which we welcome actually, to actually make the empowerment thing happen. And empowerment is all about how can we let customers use their data to drive value for them, with their consent. And we've been working hard over the last few years since we started the Smart Digits business, which is a B2B2C business. So it's a business that sells insights, personal data insights to big enterprises, mostly financial services today, but we're moving into new verticals. But of course the C for me is always the most important part of that B2B2C because it means it's an O2 customer or in O2 in UK or Germany, or a Movistar customer in Spain or Chile, or a Vivo customer in Brazil. We have 300 million customers. We want them all to participate in this ecosystem. We want them to knowingly participate, and we want them to choose if they don't want to participate as well. It's their choice, it's their data. And furthermore, we believe that actually if they move from a Telefonica operator, from O2 to Vodafone, they can take their data with them. So, but to give you some concrete examples of the empowerment in financial services, we're working with all the UK high street banks, bar one actually, but I won't mention their name, to help those banks understand some of the fraud vectors that could be involved with people signing up for mobile apps. And there's data insights that we're sharing with customers' consent that help protect against, for example, account takeover through methods like SIM swap, which is being perpetrated through organised crime, and it's done on quite a big scale actually in some of our markets. And actually, we're protecting in the UK 16 million O2 customers from this type of fraud with their consent, simply by sharing a very simple insight, but via APIs. A couple of other examples of empowerment. In Chile, we are helping Movistar customers, Movistar being our brand in Chile, get access to credit for the first time. You'll probably know that in some of the LATAM markets, you have a lot of customers with what they call thin file or no file credit records, so scant information or no information on their financial history. If you're going into a store in Chile, you want to buy a TV, you don't have the money there and then, today you would be stuck, but now you can ask for your Telefonica credit score to be taken into consideration by the retailer and the financial services provider involved. And what we're thereby doing is helping our customers get their first credit product, access to their first credit, or a better APR even than they otherwise would do in the same situation. And then finally, more back to home, where I'm based in London in the UK, we've been trialling a product we call Sign Up. Sign Up, again, is a really simple empowerment product. You can choose to use your O2 data, so name, address, date of birth, that kind of data that we store on your behalf when you sign up to O2, and you can share that with a retailer at checkout or with another third party, PayPal, these kind of companies. You can obviously choose to share that or not share it, and it's very clear in the customer journey you're doing that. And if we have your data, we'll fill in all that data for you, and it'll be done within seconds after you've passed a few security checks. So really saving customers a lot of time, really proving there's some benefit of letting them use their data. But obviously there is a commercial aspect to that as well, which benefits the enterprise and our commercial B2B business.
Can you give us a little bit of an insight into the user experience of that let's say that form filling process? At what point am I asked whether I want my O2 details to fill that form? Is it either do I give my consent at some early stage of my contract negotiations with O2, or is it when I'm in a shopping cart? Or
so what you'll do is you'll reach the registration page of the retailer, for example. Let's say it's a retailer, maybe it's ASOS, for example, and you haven't been a customer of this enterprise or this retailer before. It will be recognised that you're an O2 customer first of all, and then we'll also at some point need to figure out whether we have data for you or not. But the first thing actually is to have a checkbox where you can tick it. It's not ticked to start with, by the way. And this is important when it comes to GDPR, because actually fully informed and actioned consent is very important from May next year. And we make it very clear to you that the data will be passed from O2 to ASOS for the one-time purpose as well, because actually longevity of consent is important. Of filling out the form and making your checkout process take 10 seconds instead of 3 minutes. So really, really clear. And it drives really big customer benefits. So,
Esme, Glyn's just sort of alluded to some of the rules around GDPR and what you can and can't do. From a bank's point of view, what's the state of preparedness in terms of being, some of the things that are in GDPR around giving people the right to delete their data or to access all of their data? What's your view on how prepared a big organisation like Barclays is?
I can only speak for Barclays, but like any large institution, we've got enormous programs looking at this, and we take our compliance under it incredibly seriously. You only have to look at the fines on the table to understand the motivation behind that. Actually, what I'm focused on is more around PSD2 and something that the Competition and Markets Authority is driving in the UK called open banking. And actually, the intersection between all of those different regulations is really fascinating, because certainly for a period of time, you could argue that there are quite big tensions in them actually in terms of the requirements that GDPR has to ensure that you, as data controller, you always have visibility of that explicit consent versus actually sharing data with customer consent to parties outside of the bank, and how all that operates in practice is going to be a complex one.
Do you think, I mean, obviously this is, PSD2 has been, and open APIs have probably been debated a lot over the last couple of days, but what's your feeling on whether, on how much control that can return back to the user, and whether that's an opportunity for a bank like Barclays?
So I think it's true that we've spoken a lot about PSD2. I think we're probably all a bit PSD2 fatigued, but what I'd like to talk about a little bit actually is this competition remedy that we're seeing in the UK market, because I think actually that's got a bit less focus. And I think it's really important in terms of control, giving customers control of their data and really empowering them, because actually the mechanisms for this data sharing are going to be quite different. So for those who aren't aware, there are 9 mandated institutions in the UK, the largest current account providers, and in 6 months' time, which really is a very short amount of time in these things, we are all going to be releasing standardised APIs that enable third parties with customer permission to access customer banking data and to make payments from their accounts. And we're doing that really in a very specific and standardized way across the industry. And we're using APIs because we think that's the most secure way to share data. And crucially that it avoids, I mean, the title of this is to do with the perils of personal data. And crucially, actually, those mechanisms avoid the need to share customer credentials, which we think will be, could be a real target for fraudsters if that is the intended mechanism under PSD2. So we think there are some great advantages in what these mandated institutions in the UK are doing for January. And to your question, it presents a huge opportunity, mainly I think for customers, because they'll get hopefully the benefit of these, innovative, seamless, personalised experiences that can come through sharing their data. And from a firm perspective, I think there are opportunities for new providers and established providers alike to really kind of embrace this new data sharing ecosystem, putting the customer at the heart of it, and then delivering propositions that really work for them.
So the obvious, products that aggregate all of your financial information and enable you to make projections about what's going to happen tomorrow and that kind of thing. Are these kinds of products that Barclays will develop, or will they just release the APIs that enable third parties to do it?
Well, we think it's a huge opportunity, so we're looking at all the different business models and opportunities that might come from it. I mean, just to give an example of something we're doing already, we've launched something called Smart Business Dashboard, which if you're a small business customer of ours, it enables you to pull into one place all of the various apps that you might be using to kind of manage your business. So everything from kind of Facebook and Twitter to, your bookkeeping packages like Xero or QuickBooks. And you can see that all in one place. And the benefit clearly from a small business perspective is that means you've got everything in one place, so you can very quickly and easily gain insight and take action in a way that would have been much more difficult had we not launched that. So without giving too much away, I guess watch this space for what Barclays will do in this area, but hopefully it gives you an idea that we're really looking at the opportunities and not just releasing the APIs.
Yeah. On a more sort of general philosophical, since we're talking about philosophy level, Katrina, do you think that people really care about their data anymore? I mean, clearly they want things to work more efficiently and quickly, and what you're proposing will let them do that. But on a more general level, do they actually care about their privacy, or do they just think, oh, it's all out there now, I'm not really bothered anymore?
No, they don't care. Yes, they care the minute something goes wrong. And
right.
this is, this is the chicken and egg of this really important emerging space. It's like anything. If there's so many things we do every day that we do unconsciously that we don't really care about, and then the minute something goes wrong, whether or not it's with our transport, or whether or not it's an online payment, or whether or not your identity has been taken, all of a sudden that shifts really quickly. And one of the things I think has been a stumbling block for what's possible in this emerging space has been this privacy debate. And we often talk about the magic of the and rather than the or. Why are we constantly having this conversation about convenience or privacy as opposed to convenience and privacy? or open banking, and what goes with that, or the opportunity, and we've started to see this with some of the insurance companies we've been working with, that for more than 100 years, data and insight and risk modeling has been the core smarts, and actually turning that on its side and saying, what does that look like when you share that with a customer and you do something? So I think the notion that people wake up in the morning and worry about their privacy, of course some people do, I'm one of those people, but the idea when you surface it, and I think this is probably something that will come out in the MEF report tomorrow, when you surface it contextually, and people actually understand they don't have to make the trade-off, particularly this next digital generation. I don't like to think about that in terms of an age group, because one of the things we see often with our research is people can be digitally savvy at 6 years of age and 86 years of age. It's more kind of a mindset and a behavior. Yeah. But when you start to look at that behavior, more and more people are realizing the value of their data, the importance of their identity. Maybe that's more contextual. And if they don't have to trade between the two, then the answer more and more is yes. And I think what would be really a way of escalating the possibility is for us to get past that, do people care, right, and understand that of course people care. When something goes wrong, they want to know they can trust their bank, their insurance company, their telco, a startup that's helping them. That's essential. How do we start moving the conversation towards that being built in, and then get on with actually accelerating things?
And Cecile, you've got an academic background, so you've thought a lot about this from a sort of a broader perspective. What are your feelings? I know we were talking earlier, you said you're a little bit pessimistic about the way that data privacy is going, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a bit pessimistic, because sometimes I'm concerned about kind of a race to the bottom, that we all want all the data possible to make the best personalized product and so on, and nothing can stop us because, we want to make more money and so on. So I think there is really a key question is trust. And I really agree on that one. There are some moments where you lose trust, and then regaining trust is really, really hard. So on this side, I think this is also why from the opportunity side, AXA is working on ensuring data privacy. So for instance, if you have a problem of e-reputation, or somebody is really saying bad things about you on Google, and you are at the head of a startup, and it's a moment when you want to raise money and you're terrified, we're here for you. And I think this is also very interesting that we can protect that. A second thing, if I take my academic hat and look a bit at the future of risk and data privacy, I think today it's very, very difficult for a human brain to deal with all the opt-in, opt-out, and read all the things. And we all know this, that nobody is reading anything. But now there is AI coming up. And there are lots of people thinking about how to use AI to make like a personal assistant for you with a particular expertise on what is your position on risk, what are you ready to accept, where do you find values in sharing data, where would you rather stop? And this means that you can really have a very precise and set your rules of the game when it comes to data privacy. So I really think that AI will change the game. And if I may say one last thing, I think AI will also raise new questions. Because in an AI-driven world, with a lot of algorithms that are really autonomous and self-learning, it's not only about what data do you share, but it's also about what is the data treatment on your data, and how much can you control this. And I think this is what will come after GDPR and after PSD2. We have been a lot of focus on data, and I see in the 5 coming years much more focus on the data treatment, the algorithm, all the debate on ethics of algorithm, responsible AI that we see starting now in the EU.
So this is interesting. I mean, we were having a conversation about this earlier, but this idea that we all have relationships with digital third parties, and those third parties set the terms of that relationship because it has to be that way, because it's just not realistic for everybody to have their own terms. But with AI and bots, maybe it is. So do you think that that is something that's coming, or is that something you're working on?
Yeah, we're working on that, and we see it coming. There are already first startups and R&D projects about having an AI managing your identity, managing your preferences when it comes to data sharing. And we worked on a scenario where you wake up in the morning and every 2 or 3 months you have like an update saying, okay, as you agreed, we are I don't know, sharing your data for your city because we're improving like the pollution and the traffic, and on the other side also maybe updating you in the fact that every data about your children online is covered because there are lots of fake children playing online when they play online, so that all the data is so mixed up that nobody can actually knows what are the preferences of the child. So there are many things coming up, and this is the reason why I'm still a bit optimistic when I see the future.
Good.
But I must say, at the moment, I'm rather pessimistic because I see we are so slow to tackle such a big issue, and we need to do much more and much more collectively. There need to be much more level of discussion on which type of society do we want when it comes to sharing data.
So Cecile's just kind of alluded to the fact that we could use our data for social good. So Glyn, I know that operators sometimes describe their data as waste product in the past. It's a negative way of phrasing it, but you have so much data about the movement of people, and this not really done anything with it before. But when that's properly anonymized, or when that's given with consent, that can be incredibly useful. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what data you have and how you might be able to use it for maybe for social.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we've been at this for a few years now, Tim, actually, and taking, anonymized data. What was waste product and now is like gold, I guess. And, looking at what useful things can we do with it, both commercially. We have a really strong commercial business called Smart Steps, which is, helping customers in retail or in local government or transport companies understanding movement of crowds. So, what is the movement of, what is the market share, let's say, from Edinburgh to London of transport? And we can help them break that down by mode of transport and look at, catchment areas where people start their journeys, finish their journeys. And, the train company can help understand actually what their real market share is against what their perceived market share is. So that's the commercial side of the business. But actually way more interesting is what you asked me, which is about, big data for social good, which I think is something we should be leading on, to be honest, because, we operate, especially Telefonica, we operate in lots of challenging markets, lots of developing markets in Latin America, which have their own unique challenges and problems as they develop into, developed nations. And so if you look at things like epidemics, if you look about diseases, if you look at disasters, this is where we want to really put our data at the fore in an anonymized, aggregated way. And a good example could be, and we're doing things with city planners to help city planning and help development of municipalities in some of the Latin American countries, but we're also looking at healthcare. Really is one of the biggest prizes, I think, for this data, especially with disease and epidemics. Can we spot that actually an epidemic might be about to take off when the movement of crowds change quite radically from one week to the last, or from the last few months or weeks. People aren't leaving their homes, and suddenly a lot of people aren't leaving their homes or going to work. Can we, really spot those things a lot quicker than the health authorities would spot those things, and really, change the game, I guess, in terms of healthcare. And on a more personal level, back to my business, which is Smart Digits, can we have consent-based services where, maybe I'm the relatives, my grandma's stayed at home for 4 days, but actually she always walks to the shop most days. And actually we can spot that she hasn't walked to the shop for 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, and alert the relatives to that as well. So I think across anonymised, aggregated, and on the crowd basis, and for the whole country, there's a lot we can do with big data for social goods.
Who gives the consent, the grandmother or the son?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I'm not going to answer that.
And when you're talking about this sort of crowd-based anonymous behaviour, is there a consent element to that at all, or is that outside of the rules?
It's outside of, and even under GDPR, that will be outside. But we want to make sure that we are always, exceed our compliancy with the regulations everywhere we operate. And furthermore, we participate in the setting of these regulations. So actually, we always welcome well thought through regulation. And we look for our products to operate within those. But yeah, you're right.
So talking of whether it's a grandmother or a son or a daughter that gives consent, the way that consent is actually designed, Katrina, is very important. What have you discovered from your experiments around the best ways to actually explain some of these ideas? Do you use icons? What kind of plain English do you use? How do you display those kinds of ideas?
So I think the short answer is yes to all of those things, but what precedes that is context. I think that's the most critical thing. It's the context of it. And, if grandma is actually, the kind of old lady I'd like to think that I'll eventually be. I don't want to be told to do anything by anyone. I want to be consulted. But actually, if grandma has a carer in the home and there's a contextual bubble around taking care of her, it may actually be part of the overall care plan. So it's a much bigger deal. It's how that fits also with maybe a meal service, how it may also fit with an autonomous vehicle picking her up and taking her to the doctors. I mean, if we're thinking into the future, and so this is where consent has to be very, very contextual. So first of all, am I able-bodied? Am I fit? Am I actually the person that is the architect of this need in the moment? Well, then the consent needs to come from me. And then, am I talking to a device? Is that something that can be unlocked with my voice? Or am I using a biometric? Am I swiping something? Am I recognizing a logo? And so I think we're at the beginning of this whole consent context design field of expertise. And it will change. It will change depending on the subject, the context, and the moment. And I think, one of the things that I've seen over the course of this week is people starting to talk about what is the right method in a moment for that to be low impact, meaningful, and more importantly, to surface the consequences, both positive and negative, of agreeing. So when the family maybe makes a decision about grandma, are there positive consequences with the insurance company, or are there negative things that nobody really understood? And that's what our field of research is focusing on. How do you get that context to be as meaningful as possible?
If I may jump on that one, there is a video that I really like. It's a speculative design. It's on Nesta website, and it's an old grandpa, and he has a connected fork, and the fork is checking that he's not eating too much French fries. And he has a connected bed, and the bed is, checking that at 9 he's in bed and really sleeping his 8 hours. And he has a connected things to walk. And after some days, he gives the walking thing to the little 9-year-old neighbor. He has 2 forks, one eating salad and one French fry for him. And at 9, he put all the beers on his bed. He wants to make sure that the family is really, not worried about him. So jumping on this one, I love this video because I think this is not the world we want.
Yeah.
And this is why we need to work on legal design of consent. We need to work much more on what people want, be customer-centric when it comes to data and how we collect them. I think it's also really dependent on the cultural context.
Yeah.
For instance, we have a Are You OK app for grandmother, exactly this case, in Japan, because Japanese are really, really welcoming this type of approach. But I think this will not be something we will sell in France, because French people will not like such an intrusive patterns in their family. So I think this is something which will not have a global answer. It's personal, it's cultural, it's organizational, and we need a lot of research to make sure we make the right decision at the right moment when it comes to those types of new products.
And I think that's part of the critical reason we see the evolution in the personal data space is us as citizens, patients, students, family members, granddaughters, whatever the case may be, actually being directly part of that value chain. Because I think what's starting to change is we are both reliant on a service, and we are also part of what enables that service or unlocks that value. So it's crazy to think that we can wear technology that is so close to us and not actually be part of how that value is created. Earlier this year, I spoke at a conference where one of the speakers were talking about a little robot that you can swallow that will text you if you're about to have a heart attack. So, you're in the middle of something and then you get an SMS, 20 minutes from now you're having a heart attack. Excuse me, I just need to step out. But when you think of technology being something that's at the moment on our skin, in our clothes, but soon something inside our body, and we think of an emerging generation that will grow up in this way, it's just madness not to think that we are actually part of the design patterns and part of how that will serve humanity.
But it's such a big shift, though, isn't it? I know
No.
this is something
Well,
that you're trying to change, but
Yeah.
People don't even think like that at the moment, do they?
Yeah, but look, there's one image that is burnt into my mind, and I think this is one of the things that we have to remind ourselves of. First of all, if you're a generation growing up, I've been trying to describe to my goddaughter that there weren't mobile phones, and she just can't get it. And what do you mean? What if the phone rang and you weren't at home? And she just can't get her head around it. It's just like, but how do you know someone was going to ring you? Well, the phone would just ring. Oh, but what if you weren't there? So first of all, let's think about it from a generational point of view. Try explaining to an 8-year-old that there wasn't something before a mobile phone. The other image in my mind is that picture in New York in the 20s, I think, where a street full of horses, one car. Same image a decade later, all cars, one horse. And everything that we're resisting at the moment around the move from everyone, owning a horse and a carriage to this crazy, dangerous, technology that is the car, happened relatively quickly. And so, I think often when we say this won't happen, it's my generation, that is holding on to things. And when I speak to my goddaughter, or I say to her, what would it look like for you to have a relationship with your data? She describes the kinds of things that are coming out of ideation, like people that are being paid thousands of euros to come up with concepts. And you've got a 9-year-old sort of drawing it and saying, well, the robot would come to me and ask me for permission. So I think, again, it's a generational shift, and technology has always been pushing us forward, and some things happen faster than we think, and some things happen slower, but it's not a reason to stop.
And the combination of the regulation and the mindset change that you're talking about, what are the implications for Facebook and Google, do you think?
Well, somebody else can answer that.
Well, I wanted to ask everyone, but no one will probably answer that question. Will you?
Well, I don't mind.
Lovely.
Talking about.
I thought you guys were too corporate to answer, but you're not, Glyn. So well done.
I think the interesting thing about these guys is, clearly, they are using your data and you are the product, and they would openly say that themselves, I think. And they've made very successful businesses out of it, and congratulations, to them in a way. We are a different business. We've been around, actually since 1920, so nearly 100 years, and we sell, connectivity. So making a phone call effectively and using data now and sending texts and all the rest of it. But people pay us for that product, and they pay 20 euros, 30 euros, whatever per month in Western markets. And therefore, we serve very good services, I would say, for that connectivity. But I think what they don't want to see is us creating another business, which is a big data business, which is of equal size and complexity to the connectivity business, and that's not our ambition. In fact, we've never said that's our ambition. But what we do see is the ability to empower customers, and some of the examples I mentioned. But we do absolutely understand our core business is connectivity, always will be connectivity. We want to make sure that actually we can learn and grow as the market changes, like we just discussed. Technology changes, we'll move with it, we'll help our customers, we'll empower them. They will always have a choice to opt in and opt out of any service we offer them or a third party offers them. But we will never be a Google in the sense of being a data business, and we're really clear about that.
But do we think that they will be weakened by some of the new controls? Come on, someone answer. Katrina, you haven't got any you want to say or think?
Look, here's the thing. It's 2017, 2018. You walk into a VC and you pitch this idea that you're going to create, a platform that essentially takes data and information from individuals, which you trade, which the individual is outside of, and you think about what that business model looks like starting from scratch today with everything that we're talking about, where we're moving to, distributed solutions, where identity and fraud are really important, where regulated industries like banking and telecommunications and insurance and health are really required to participate with their stakeholders. It's very hard to imagine a reason why a single platform would control all of that value without dispersing it. So I think, will they be here in a decade or two? I don't know. What I do know is their business models will need to evolve, because the current model of saying, here, share a photograph or give somebody an update, and on average, we will be able to monetize that at $165 US, in a developed country. It's just not equitable. And it may well have been in the beginning, but the truth of it is now that one data point at a moment where there's a product or a service you do need, and it's accurate and it's real time and it can be trusted and it's contextual, is actually worth a lot. And this is what people are actually starting to wake up to. So I think there was a time where that sort of created this connectivity, but I just can't see somebody starting that today.
I think trust is a really interesting one. So when we look at kind of opening up banking data, who are consumers going to trust to share that with? And one of my personal going in assumptions was, I bet they'll share it with Facebook. All the research that I've seen on it suggests that is absolutely not who they want to share their banking data with, and that actually the likely recipients of this banking data might actually be other banks. So you should really think, I think, customers will be very savvy about who they share, particularly data that they see as sensitive with, and those kind of assumptions that actually these enormous platforms will rule the roost won't necessarily be the right outcome. Trust is still a really important factor in the sharing of banking data.
You'll have noticed that I didn't mention Slido earlier, so apologies for that, but we're not using Slido on this session because you're such a select and important group of people. So I don't know if we've got time maybe for one question, if there is one from the crowd. If not, we will...
Hands up the back.
Yeah? Can you shout, sir? Oh, there is a handheld. Okay.
Thank you. I just have one question for the panel, which is if you're sort of thinking about who's potentially going to act as a broker for information on behalf of third parties, it could be a new business model like Katarina, you're working on, but could it be a current player as well? So, for example, the credit bureaus, they're used to adjudicating on controversial issues. They don't own the data. They're an independent third party, and they deal with an awful lot of regulation. I don't work for the credit bureaus, but just throwing out that idea.
I mean, I don't mind giving a first stab at that. I actually sat in on here on a session earlier on credit scoring, and it was quite a robust debate going on, actually. I think the moderators actually sat behind you. So
I was going to say, Andrew is just there.
So Andrew can attest to that. I mean, intermediaries, I think what you need to think about is every time data is passing through another third party, there's a chance for something to go wrong. Data is being processed, stored, manipulated, transferred, and actually if you think about, just from a technical perspective about good architectures, never mind the good regulation and good practice around privacy and security. Actually, having those long value chains where lots of data passes through lots of third parties, I think is generally not a good thing. But there might be markets where that makes sense from a commercial perspective. I think we heard earlier on about some of the bad sides of credit scoring. Clearly, it does serve a market very well. But I think generally speaking, my view is that the fewer intermediaries, the better, at least as things stand today.
I also think it depends on the value proposition. This happened to me 2 weeks ago. I was in Australia. I was called by one of the leading credit bureaus in the world. Somebody had asked, we'd just been through a procurement process, and the last part of it was the credit check. And they called me to say, look, this has to be expedited. They want it in 24 hours. Will you now answer these questions? And I was absolutely dumbfounded because I was answering, I mean, I could have told them anything, but when we got to the end of the application, they said, well, now do we have your permission to send it? And I'm just sitting there scratching my head going, okay, someone's going to pay for this right now. This has all been self-asserted. I did give them permission to contact my bank, but I shared some additional information that I thought would be meaningful. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what they would have paid for this expedited report, but there was not a shred of value that I could see was created in that exchange for any of us. Because I even had to ring my accountant to say, first of all, I wanted them to validate and prove that they were from who they were, and then I had to call back, and then I needed them to share some credentials, and I wanted them to authenticate, and I wanted to, so I went through that whole process of, are you really who you are? And then I'm sitting there thinking, I would have been really happy for us as a director of the company and also as a supplier to make all of that available by saying, speak to my bank. I would have been really, really happy to do that. And so I think a lot of these legacy business models will be really challenged because what's the value proposition? Which isn't to say that they can't evolve, but I think in their current form, there are really some challenges to those existing models.
You should have just said, do you know who I am? That should have been your...
Well, no, they were going crazy because I said, well, first of all, prove to me that you are. Okay, don't give me a 1-800 number, and anyway. But
okay. Well, anyway, I would have said that. So anyway, thank you very much for listening, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I would like to thank Glyn, Cecile, Esme, and Katrina, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you.